Now I'm going to ask them to each of them give 1 or 2 minute just closing remarks, and we'll finish this up with their talking rather than me. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And what I guess I would like you to take away from what I've talked about is that you need to ask questions constantly of your own local school board and your State Department of Education people. They should be able to explain what is happening in your school curriculum. And if you have problems, they should be able to have nights sponsored, sessions sponsored. Your school board should be able to have people to talk rationally about why these problems exist. My concern in general, which has spurred a lot of my speaking across the country, is that parents have been the major ignored group in all of this. No matter where I go, they are the group of people who are the last ones to be reached out to, and yet it's their children who are the object of all of this. I was in San Diego in November, where Arnie Duncan was speaking at a conference of CCSSO, the Council of Chief Safety Officers. Parents decided, a few of them, to picket outside. He knew they were outside. He didn't ask them to come in. He didn't want to speak to them. He wasn't interested in what the parents had as concerns. There is something wrong with the situation where the only groups that are not invited to be part of any discussion of Common Core are the people whose children are in the schools. Never would have happened with me. I was in the schools bothering the people in the schools all the time. They knew I had 5 children, so they were constantly being badgered by some question about what was happening in one of my children's classrooms, because I was one of those tiger moms that wanted to find out every night at the dinner table what was going on. What did you learn today? Your teachers didn't teach you anything? That's the idea. So you ask questions and let them know that they simply can't accept indifferent parents, and we have a lot of them in this country, and that is a good part of the problem we are facing. There are a lot of many indifferent parents who have no idea, don't care maybe, what is happening to their children in the schools. And we need far more responsible parents who do pay attention to what is going on. Most of the teachers intend well, most administrators do, but we've got people with ideas that don't make sense.
Yeah, well, there really isn't that much I can say, besides which I'm just exhausted. But there are a couple things that I tried to bring forth, and I hope you'll think about them. One of them that I tried to ask is really as a question was, what can the objectives, the real objectives in mathematics of the Common Core standards possibly be? And you see, and I put in, and that's why I described the backgrounds of the 3 major authors of the standards, because I think the people that actually headed up the project, who were invisible, who to this day we don't know their names, they have something very definite in mind for these standards, and I think that the way you should get at what they might have had in their minds is to look at what could possibly have been the motivation for choosing the 3 authors that they chose to write them. 2 people with no qualifications whatsoever for writing standards, having never done it. Both of whom were mathematicians, to be sure, but one of them had written a demonstrably flawed textbook in calculus, and the third one being a gentleman who had consistently failed at producing standards that survived the test of even a short time in the States. He did them. So what could possibly have been their objective? How would these choices fit in with real objectives behind the Common Core? I'm not going to answer this for you because I'm not sure of what the answer is. I certainly have suspicions, but I'd like to leave you with that as a thing that you should think about as a way of sharpening your own thinking about the Common Core. And the other thing that I'd like to leave you with is again, to remind you of the dramatic change in the makeup of the students, the graduate students and the undergraduate students in our better schools, in our better colleges and universities in this country. That this is something that there is no logical reason for. There is no way you can possibly believe that a student from China will simply be automatically smarter than a student from the United States. It doesn't make sense, it isn't true. And yet, they far outperform our students. Why is this, and what can we do about it? These are the things I'd like you to think about, and thank you very much for coming and for your attention.
And I would like to read a letter that I received at about 3 o'clock today from Superintendent of Public Instruction, Eric Yaga, Dale Eric Yaga, and so I will read that now. He said, the Nevada Department of Education was invited to the Citizens for Sound Academic Standards to participate in a forum they organized in Carson City to discuss the Nevada academic content standards based on Common Core. The organizers invited 2 professors from out of state, our professors here, from out of state, to participate in the forum. As with all requests to engage in a discussion about Nevada standards, my staff invited Nevada teachers to participate in this discussion. I consider our educators to be the most credible and knowledgeable speakers about Nevada standards. This fact was communicated to the organizers and to the legislator who reserved the room in Carson City. When my staff arrived at the forum last night, they were abruptly notified that the department's teacher presenters, including an associate superintendent and educators from the Carson City School District, would not be allowed to speak at the forum. Attempts by my staff to provide teachers a voice in the conversation about their standards were met with a disrespectful, if not aggressive, response. Worse, one of the organizers physically removed a Nevada educator invited to speak on behalf of the department. That educator filed assault charges with legislative police earlier today. This is not the Nevada way of engaging in public discourse. I am compelled to denounce the Citizens for Sound Academic Standards and the visiting professors for silencing Nevada teachers to speak at a public forum and for resorting to intimidation tactics before and during the meeting to silence teacher voices. There is room for differences of opinion on this topic, but I cannot support participation in a forum that incites bullying and censorship. Department staff will not participate in the symposium on Common Core scheduled to occur in Fallon tonight, or any other event involving these organizers and their out-of-state professors. Furthermore, I expect these individuals to apologize to Nevada educators." End quote. I'd like to also read you my response to Mr. Eric Yaga. I say, this is to Ms. Osgood, who was supposed to be one of the speakers tonight, our presenters. I said, please convey to Superintendent Eric Yaga my disappointment in his decision not to have participation in the symposium tonight. Although I was not at the symposium last night in Carson City, I do know how I operate and am confident that the same would not have happened at this location. It was my plan to provide the guest speakers an equal amount of time for their presentation and rebuttals. Then it was my plan to allow comments and questions from the public. Any school teacher with a desire to speak could have taken time during the question-comment period. Although it is true, I was not going to allow filibustering. I would have allowed sufficient time for comments. I and many others were looking forward to the sharing of ideas tonight, and I simply believe you have played right into the hands of those who want to frustrate debate. With regret, I will read Superintendent Eric Yaga's statement tonight. Thank you. And that's what I said to him. Now, tonight, so we don't have folks here from the Department of Education, but we would like to continue what we're going to do because our guest speakers have come a long way, and they're experts in this field. And so, you know, sometimes you got to go out of state to get somebody that can talk knowledgeably about a subject, and I believe these folks really have a lot to offer. And so what I would like to do is turn the time over to Dr. Stotsky and to Dr. Milgram, and they have some comments before we start going and talking so much about Common Core, because I did tell them I was going to read the statement from Superintendent Eric Yaga. They would like to also address a little bit of last night's meeting in Carson City before they start discussing Common Core as they know it. And then they will take probably about 20 minutes each, give or take a minute or two, on Common Core, and so about 40 minutes or 45 minutes, and then we will do as we had planned, and that is open it up for comments and questions to you, the public. So with that, let me bring the microphone over, and I will stop talking, and I'll let you have it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Is that coming through?
Yep.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment on last night's episode. I'm not sure yet how to describe it, but I will be writing up the details from my perspective once I return to Boston tomorrow. It is surprising to me that, having been a member of a Department of Education, as I was in Massachusetts for almost 5 years, that your public servants do not seem to think they are public servants. We understood that we knew that we were paid by the state legislature, and that if a citizen group invited us to speak and gave us the conditions for speaking, that we would be happy to take advantage of the opportunity to communicate with audiences out there, parents and others in the state, and abide by the conditions of the people who issued the invitation. And this is not what happened last night. Both of us had been asked several weeks ago to appear on the platform panels for these two evening events, and we both agreed that we would be happy to speak about our concerns with Common Core with policy makers from the department. Two of us, two of them. We conveyed that very clearly, and that was conveyed to the Department of Education. The Department of Education has a series of emails that it received, and we have the latest one that was sent on January 8th. So there was plenty of time for everyone to be fully aware that, yes, there was to be 2 and 2. Oh, you don't, is it not?
I'm getting signs from the back that they're having a little trouble.
Okay, maybe
There you go.
that's better if I, okay, I have to get even closer to this. All right. And so we arrived last night having some inkling that not only would we face 2 people from the department, there might be several more staff members from the department and a few more teachers from Nevada there. It wasn't clear how many people we would be facing across the panel. That isn't exactly abiding by the rules of the organization that did the inviting, which is a grassroots organization. And indeed, we engaged in some conversation with the deputy superintendent to explain that we were not going to engage in a talk with anyone else except the two people who were listed on the program as being there. This was not acceptable to them, and they insisted on bringing up other people. We said no, we would abide by the rules that we had insisted upon from the very beginning. We would have talked to policymakers, people from the Department of Ed. They owe us an apology. I think they've got the whole thing backwards, and it is really unfortunate that they do not realize that they are public servants paid for by taxpayers like you and should be engaged in a conversation with people like us who were there from the very beginning of the development of Common Core at its birth in 2009. So this is now 5 or 6 years later. So we could not engage in a dialogue with a changing cast of characters, which was part of the issue. How do you talk to not just two people over there, but a changing group of people over there? I don't think they realize what a silly scheme they had, and it really was a silly scheme. I would have been embarrassed if I had been a member of that department and this is what my department had come up with as a scheme. We didn't do things like that. We do other things in Massachusetts, but not things like that. Every department has its own ideas. So I'm going to let Jim add whatever he wants, but I do think we are owed an apology. I know that Nevada parents and other people would not do what the Department of Education staff did.
Well, okay, right here, huh? Can you hear me in back? So, okay, so I don't really have much to add to what Sandy said. That what we faced was, first of all, rude, arrogant, and aggressive behavior on the part of, as she says, public servants. And I have seldom been treated with such contempt. So I think that, as I agree that with Sandy, that we are owed an apology. Well, we did, there is one thing, but let's not dwell on this. There is one thing that we did do here. As a reminder of what happened, we put up the 2 chairs that should have been occupied by the people from the department. And we'll leave those chairs in place, and they will be a reminder to you of the fact that the people in your Department of Education chose not to discuss with us the issues, the real issues that lie behind and Common Core and that Common Core leads to.
Could I mention one thing? Jim told me earlier that they've had this happen before in other states on the second night, where they didn't show up the second night after the conversations on the first night.